Hi folks, and welcome to the concluding part of my ukulele tutorial, which is how to play the ukulele in 10 easy steps. Now, it's been quite fun to do this over the past 2 or 3 months, but what I decided to do with this one is to do an overview. So I'm going to break down each lesson individually, and then if you haven't taken it yet or you want to return to it, this is a little reminder to jog your memory. Okay, so we started off with lesson 1 and we looked at a really useful tool called the circle of fifths. Now, think back to when you first started playing the ukulele. You learnt 2 or 3 chords, and I bet amongst those was the chords C, F and G. Now, it may be G7, but basically the root parts of those chords are C, F and G. Now, why do you think that was? It's because they belong to what's called a family. So if you were to play the chord of C, maybe using C7 as a link chord to go to F, then to G7, it takes you back to C. So therefore, it's what we call a family. Okay, now as well as having the major chords in that little family of the C group, there are also some minors. We have A minor, E minor, and also D minor. So in this lesson, we look at what it is if we were in the key of C. However, if you were to rotate the circle of fifths diagram, either clockwise or anti-clockwise, if you wanted to change the key, that's exactly how you do it. So if we were in the key of C and we want to transpose everything that we were using, all those chords we were using, but to put them in the key of F, we would rotate clockwise the circle of fifths, and you would see all the chords necessary to play in the key of F. Likewise, if you were to go anti-clockwise and you wanted to have a look in the key of G, you could also do that. So all in all, a great place to start. So what happened next? Lesson 2. Lesson 2, we explore changing the names of chords into numbers. So you may have heard of the expression a 1-4-5, which is typically a blues progression, or a 2-5-1, which is a typical ending. Well, we explore basically these numbers. What do they mean? How do we come across them? You know, what is the connection between the numbers and also the chords? Well, it's all to do with what we call intervals. Now, it's not very complicated because I do it with graphics on the screen, and as with all the lessons, there is a printout so you can see for yourself how these numbers actually work. Once you've learnt the numbers in one key, for example, if we're playing in the key of C and we rotate the circle of fifths, those numbers still apply to all those chords, but obviously they're different chords, but the numbers remain the same no matter what key you're playing in. So lesson 2 is to do with changing chord names for numbers. Lesson 3 continues with that sort of idea, but we're going to actually use these sequences and I'm going to play them and give examples of songs that use these sequences. It's quite surprising when you actually go through them how many songs do use the same chords and in the same order. It's hard to believe sometimes, but this lesson really looks deep into using these chord progressions as numbers in sequences. So, for example, as well as the aforementioned 1-4-5 and 2-5-1, we've got 1-6-2-5, 1-6-4-5. I think there's even a 1-2-3-4-5 somewhere in there. So, using numbers instead of chords, but also popular songs that use those formats. That's lesson 3. Lesson 4 is a bit of a 2-in-1. To start with, I look at what's called link chords. So we've already spoken about playing tunes in different keys by turning the circle of fifths, but you can't just swap from one key to another. There has to be a sort of middle ground or a link chord, and that's what we look at as the first part of lesson 4. So we're looking at what is that little secret chord that will take us from one key to another. The second part of the video is looking at the diminished chord. The diminished chord is fascinating. It's a really nice sort of chord and often used in sort of suspense situations. You'll know what I mean if you listen to it, if you haven't watched the lesson before. A fantastic chord, and it's quite unique in that it could be called any one of its components. So just for example, these are wrong, but if you had A, B, C and D making up that chord, it could actually be called A, B, C or D. Now, those aren't the right names or letters for those chords, but I'm just explaining how that principle works. Also, with that shape, it's one of the only shapes where you can actually move it with the same shape exactly, like 3 frets up and 3 frets up again and 3 frets up again. So you're creating inversions by keeping the same shape. So it is very unique, and I love the chord. Hopefully you will too. So that is lesson 4. Lesson 5 is a topic close to my heart. It's to do with intros and outros or endings. Many years ago, I went to see a ukulele group, and I'm sure you've experienced this as well if you belong to a uke group. There was no conductor as such, no leader, and I think they were playing Sloop John B. And somebody in the top left-hand corner started playing it, and then you could see, literally, it was working across the room. Oh, Sloop John B, what page are we on? Where do we go now, sort of thing. And it worked its way across the room. And by the time it got to the right-hand side, one verse had already happened. Do you know what I mean? So, yes, if you're in a uke group and it's a social activity, you want to have a bit of fun, I'm all for it. I haven't got a problem with that. But if you want to improve your playing and improve the overall sound of the group, 1, you have to have a leader, and 2, you have to have 2 ingredients, the intro and the outro. So what I've done in this lesson is gone through the key of C, the key of F, and the key of G. Yes, there are more keys, but we couldn't spend all year on it. So those 3 keys. Also what I've done is I've shown them with different examples of speeds, how you can use the same intro chords, outro chords with different speeds, also time signatures. And I've also given examples of real tunes where these actual intros and outros could be used. So that is lesson 5. Lesson 6 is fascinating in the fact that we're looking at alternative chords or substitute chords. Now, again, this is a topic very close to my heart, and I try in my own playing, to use substitute chords rather than the basic chords, just to add a little bit of spice, if you like. Okay, so what I've done is I've taken a tune called Killing Me Softly. I've got a straight version, but then I use it with some alternative substitute chords, and you'd be surprised with such a little effort that you need to put in how the sound can come on like 100%. So see for yourself, what is it like to use substitute chords with the demonstration piece Killing Me Softly. Okay, so number 8 is like a bumper edition. I start off by looking at the use of different fingers to get the same chord shape. So you might be thinking, well, why? Well, it often depends on the chord you're coming from and the chord that you're going to, which are the best fingers to use. And you'd be surprised, you can make it a lot easier in a sequence by changing the fingers of a middle chord in a sequence. So this is what we explore to start with in this lesson. Then we start looking at using our ears. I've been playing by ear since the age of 8. I can also read, but I prefer to use my ear, and over the years it has definitely developed. So much so now that if somebody was playing a ukulele and I was blindfolded, I would actually be able to tell what chords they were playing. Now that's not to do with pitch or perfect pitch, it's to do with recognizing the sound that those chords make. So I break this up into 2 things. Firstly, we explore what does a major chord sound like as compared to a minor chord. What does a diminished chord sound like? What does a sus4 chord sound like? What does a minor 7th chord sound like? So I go through various demonstrations of pieces and playing those chords, and we have a bit of a quiz. So then I will start to play some chords. I don't want you to tell me what the chord is. I want you to tell me what type of chord it is. So is it a major? Is it a minor? Is it diminished? Etc., etc. Then That's when we up the ante. We then start to listen to a chord, and if you could tell me what the chord is, you'd be surprised how easy this is if you do it a number of times. For example, the first chord that you ever played on your uke, I guarantee it was C major. Now, that has a unique sound to it. And if I was to blindfold you now, basically I was to play it, you would tell me, Peter, that is a C major. The reason is it's memory. You've heard it so many times, and it gives off a unique sound in the fact you've got an open G string, an open C string, an open E string, and then you've got the C octave as well. It has a unique sound to it. Because you've done it a million times, you know that it's a C major. If I was to play an F major, slightly harder, but it has a different sound because you're covering two strings with two open strings. So what I'm not looking for is for learning sort of pitch perfect, although it is a bonus if you can do that. But I'm about one tone away from being pitch perfect. If I was to restring a ukulele and I was trying to find out where was G, C, E, A just by ear, I'm usually within a fret or two of that G, C, E, A. To add a little bit of spice to this episode, very kindly, two people volunteered to help me with this, and they are the ukuleles. So why did I invite them along? Because the final part of this episode is to try and teach people that they can look up and look at the audience and not look at what they're doing with the left hand and right hand. Can it be done? Of course it can be done. And they've come along very generously to give up their time, and they're going to show how they managed to play the ukulele, some very complex arrangements, chords and chord progressions, yet they don't have sight. So they're going to share with you some of the things that they do to combat that, so you've got no excuse. Okay, that is lesson 8, bumper edition. Lesson number 9. We look at ukuleles from the soprano to the concert to the tenor, and we recognise that in the main those are tuned to G, C, E, A. However, the next one up in the ukulele series is the baritone, and that has different tuning. That has D, G, B, E. Now, the great news is, if you've played ukulele before, G, C, E, A, you can use all the chord shapes that you've already learnt and transfer them over to the baritone. However, because the tuning is different, the chord names have to change. Now, after a while, you get used to doing that, but to start you off, what I've done is created a chart, and I've looked at major chords, I've looked at dominant seventh chords, and I've also looked at minor chords. And on one side, I've got what it would be, what shape you would need to play on a G, C, E, A tuning to, say, play the chord of C. And right next to it, what shape you would need to get that same chord of C. And of course, that shape is going to be different. Now, I've done that for whole tones going from C all the way through to C, which should get you started. But looking at the baritone with a sheet, everything on one page should help you with doing that transition. So finally, here we are at lesson number 10, which is an overview of what we've done throughout the course. I hope you've enjoyed it. Of course, it's been free of charge, and every lesson has had a printable PDF. Also, this one has, if you haven't printed it off already, have a look in the YouTube description. So this has been real fun to do. I hope you've got something from it. Now, there are other people out there who are offering lessons, and some of my best friends around the world are doing it. As well as on YouTube, they use a thing called Patreon even, and I do the same. Now, my Patreon channel is called Ukulele Shortcuts. Now, what I wanted to do to be different than everybody else is to try and create a ukulele community. So how do I do that? Well, I set tasks for everybody that's a member, and then what happens is a percentage of people will then send me a video to show me what they've done. So, for example, the last 2 I sent out last month, I sent out 2 videos, but I got 5 videos back from patrons within Ukulele Shortcuts, all showing to me what they can do, but also sharing it with the other patrons. So it's a great feeling to be able to do it. One, it's self-esteem for the person who's actually learnt it and shared it, but also I think it's an encouragement to those who haven't had a go yet or were struggling a little bit, just to see if somebody else can do it, maybe they can do it too. I think it's a great way of learning, and if you want to find out more about Patreon, have a look in the description below. So as I say, this is the end of the series. Are you a professional player by doing these 10 lessons? Maybe not, but what you are is certainly more advanced than when you started. If you've done every single lesson, followed it to the letter, you are now a pretty competent player and may be ready to move on to the next level, as in what I was suggesting with Ukulele Shortcuts. It's been great fun doing it. Until we meet again, you all take care, stay safe, see you soon. Ta-ra!